We're starting to. Hello and welcome everybody. As you're just joining in, we will wait about 1 to 2 minutes and then we will get started. Hello and welcome to everybody. As you're just joining in, we'll wait about 30 seconds and then we will get started. Alrighty, hello and welcome everybody to today's webinar, Plant Powered. If you would like, please share in the chat where you are calling in from. So where are you joining in? On the bottom of your screen, you'll have a few options for the chat, and you can chat to everyone or you can chat to just hosts and panelists. And then you'll also see a Q&A at the bottom of your screen. So you can ask any questions through the Q&A feature throughout. And then you'll also see on the bottom an option for captions. So if you have a different preferred language, you can turn on your captions and select an auto-translated language that you would like. And if you have any difficulties finding those captions, just please directly chat the hosts and panelists and we'll make sure that you can get those translations. Before we dive in, my name's Anna Miller and I'm the program manager with the Healthier Together team. I have Leslie here, who's a registered dietitian with Bon Appetit. And today we will be going over Plant Powered, and Leslie will get way more into that as we move on. The webinar is being recorded. We will send an email to all registrants. So even if you have to leave early, if you registered for the webinar and you're here, you'll get the recording and the slide deck emailed out to you. And I will turn it over to Leslie and we'll get started.
Great, thank you, Anna, and hello, everyone. It's fantastic to see. I love the addition of asking where everyone is from. I'm seeing all of, we've got lots of different, parts of the world represented today. So I'm excited to be bringing you all of this topic. As Anna said, I'm Leslie Mathis-Meyer, and I am a registered dietitian with Bon Appetit Management Company. And I'm excited today to bring you a topic of plant-forward diets and, how you can power yourself on plants and how that may look for you and all the different benefits that go along with it. So overall, plant-based diets are really on the rise. Anna and I were just talking before about how much more it's like more mainstream to eat plant-based. You're hearing about it in social media, some of your favorite athletes are talking about how they're integrating more plants into their diets and the benefits there. You're seeing it in kind of like general mainstream restaurants. So some of our favorite chain restaurants are having more plant-based items on their menus. So it's becoming much more widely known and widely available across all the different places that we eat. So today we're going to talk about the different plant-forward eating styles, all of the different health considerations that go along with that. And then I'm going to give you some tips on how you can adopt more of a plant-based or a plant-forward eating style in your everyday life. So yeah, quick agenda, just so you can kind of follow along with what we'll be talking about today. All of the different plant-forward eating patterns and what those look like. In general, plant-forward nutrition, how it benefits your body, and some of the things to ensure that you are getting within your diet in order to have a healthful plant-based diet. We'll also talk a little bit about are all plant-forward diets healthy? What really encompasses a really healthy, more plant-forward diet? And then I want to give you some tips. What are some things that you can include in your pantry that can help you be a little bit more plant-forward? How can you cook in a more plant-forward way? How do you take those little baby steps towards incorporating more plants? So there's many different terms out there to describe diets that consist of mostly of plants, and not one, sometimes not one individual's way of eating, if they are integrating more plants, is same as the next person. And there's really not necessarily like a standard definition of plant forward, plant-based, that types of things. And sometimes they're even used kind of interchangeably between each other. But for the purposes of this presentation, I want to kind of give a little bit of structure around that, just so we can all be on the same page and talking about it the same way. So the term plant-based is often used to mean a vegan diet, or a diet consisting of only foods from plant sources. We'll get into more about what a vegan diet is here in a second. And then a plant forward, or maybe a plant-centric diet is maybe what you have heard. Those terms are used to describe diets that are made up of mostly plants. So this may be someone who has more of a vegetarian diet. They may have more of a flexitarian diet. But basically, they may include some animal products in their diet, but maybe it's in varying amounts, so smaller amounts than others. And they kind of play with it, and it fits them, their personal needs and goals. The term plant forward is, relatively new. Like I said, it's becoming much more prevalent in culture and all the different places that you may hear it. But it really got popularized mostly from Menus of Change. So Menus of Change is an organization within the Culinary Institute of America, and they defined plant forward as a style of cooking and eating that emphasizes and celebrates, but it's not limited to plant-based foods. So it's those fruits and vegetables, so any of your different produce items, whole grains, beans, legumes, pulses as well, and different soy foods, nuts, seeds, plant-based oils, herbs and spices, and all of these different things. It reflects the evidence-based principles around health and the benefits of those different items to your health, as well as to sustainability. So when you hear about Menus of Change and you hear a lot about different plant-forward diets, you're often hearing the words that it's good for you and good for the planet. And for differing reasons for different individuals, some people may be wanting the benefits and have goals driving them to eat more plant-based that are related to their health. Some people are looking at it more from a sustainability lens. And then some people kind of fall in the middle. Maybe they're wanting to benefit their health, but they also really enjoy the fact that the way eating more plant-based is benefiting the earth that we're living in. So now let's look at those different eating patterns around diets that are made up of mostly plants. So first, let's take a deeper dive into a diet that is completely plant-based, So, and that is the vegan diet. So vegan diets, they are completely plant-based. They do not include any animal products. Many people who follow a vegan eating pattern also adopt other lifestyle choices that are vegan as well. So maybe that's cosmetics or different clothing items, different materials that they're purchasing. For example, they may not have leather or wool or fur, different things like that to go along with their belief in vegan. Vegan and raw diets as well are kind of those are like the most restrictive of all the plant diets. And that's because they do not contain any animal products. So they're not going to have meat, dairy, butter, poultry, anything that comes from an animal. And they are also not having things such as honey, or for some vegans, they look to the type of sugar and how that sugar is processed in eating vegan, and whether they have that in their diet. A raw vegan diet is raw foods that are not cooked above 105 degrees Fahrenheit. So even more restriction within that type of vegan diet. And like I said in the beginning, a lot of people have different varying reasons for the diet that they choose. But for someone who is adopting a vegan diet, it may be for religious reasons. It may be an ethical reason around not having animals as part of their diet, or having different products that are either tested or made from animals in any way. It may be environmental concerns that they may have, and they may also be doing it for their health, or any of those different things in varying levels and degrees. So now let's talk about vegetarian diets. And so these are predominantly plants, but they are also still incorporating some animal products in small portions. So there's a lot of different types of vegetarian diets, and none are as rigid or as restrictive as the two vegan diets that we just talked about. Some vegetarians, they only eat dairy. Some only eat dairy and eggs. And so those are either lacto vegetarians, so they are only eating dairy, they will not eat eggs. And some are lacto-ovo vegetarians, where they do still consume dairy, but they don't, and they do consume eggs as well. But they're still considered vegetarian. It's just their preference on kind of another level of things that they are not including in their diet. A lot of different religions will advocate for a vegetarian diet in different ways. So different types of fasting, they will either be vegan or vegetarian. Overall, just in general, as part of their religion, they are vegetarian, or they're just restricting the types of animal foods that should be eaten within those religious preferences. Just like with vegan, a lot of people have different reasons for abiding by a vegetarian diet. It could be for those religious reasons I just talked about, could be for ethical reasons, environmental concerns, health concerns, any of those different things. They could be choosing to have a vegetarian diet for those reasons. So next, let's talk about the most flexible of all of the plant-forward diets, and that is the flexitarian diet. So the term flexitarian really has gotten a lot more popular after there's a dietitian, Don Jackson Lechner, that wrote the book Flexitarian Diet. Actually, it's in 2010, so it's a little while ago now, but that's really where it became most popular. And it's actually used kind of more broadly now to describe a diet that's mostly plant-based, but not solely plant-based. So it's a lot more flexible in nature, and an individual may include some animal products in some way. So there's also some individuals who kind of like do like a combination of the two, where sometimes they're vegetarian, sometimes they're flexitarian. But this is kind of those who they still incorporate animal proteins in some way, but sometimes they do choose to be more vegetarian or more vegan. So just as the name implies, it's much more flexible. There's not necessarily any rules around being flexitarian. Like, it's not like, oh, well, 50% of your meals are plant-based, and so you're flexitarian, or, out of the, 14 meals or whatever during the week, or however many meals you have during the week. 14 wouldn't be completely accurate, but for the sake of our discussion today, if there's certain meals that There's no rules around saying, you know, certain meals need to be vegetarian or vegan in order for you to say that you are flexitarian. There's gonna, you know, as people are exploring becoming more plant-based, a lot of times they start with a more flexitarian diet. So maybe if you're a beginner and moving into this and just kind of a little curious about how you can incorporate more plants, maybe you have some hesitations, you don't know really how to start or where to go. Maybe this presentation is your start into eating more plant-based. Maybe you're incorporating 2 meatless meals per week. Then, you know, you're moving into, you know, as you feel comfortable and more confident in different areas, then you're having 3 to 4 meatless meals per week. And then, you know, moving your way up to where, you know, eventually maybe you have 5, or, you know, it's really intermittent. Maybe it's a point where, you know, it's just when you're going out to dinner and you want to enjoy, you don't want to restrict your menu choices and you want to eat animal protein. So however that looks to you, there are no rules around it. I myself, this is where I kind of the bucket that I fall into. I kind of have like a little hierarchy in my head of how I, you know, prefer to eat. I, for the most part, am vegetarian. I have 3 little kids at home, so it's really not feasible for me to go vegan because cheese is a pretty big mainstay in our diets, in our meals, and so our eggs. So we have those on our menu pretty often. And I also just enjoy going out and having dinner with my husband and going to a seafood restaurant and enjoying oysters. And in my mind, there's no vegan or vegetarian substitute for oysters, and I love them. And so, you know, that's something that I make room for, and still, you know, my personal preference, it meets my goals as far as my health, as well as my other motivations for eating more plant-based. So now that we've talked about those different types of plant-forward diets, let's look at the different health considerations around eating a diet of mostly plants. So there's a lot of different documented benefits of eating more plant-forward, and you can see them here. Specifically, vegetarian and vegan diets have been associated with the benefits that you see on this slide. So a lower risk of type 2 diabetes, blood cholesterol, blood pressure, heart disease, cancer, overall total mortality, and a higher intake of some of those nutrients that a lot of our diets are usually more, are lower on the need scale. So fiber, magnesium, potassium, those vitamins and minerals that are often lacking in our diets are much higher in vegan and vegetarian diets. But just as we're talking about all those different diets and whichever, you know, way you choose to eat and which one you choose to adopt, should you decide to go more plant-based, you're still going to see some of these benefits within your personal health. So just by having a few more plant-based diets or plant-based meals within your diet, you will see possibly a lower risk of cancer, lower risk of type 2 diabetes, improvements within blood pressure, or, you know, heart health markers and things like that. So it really doesn't have to be all or nothing to reap these benefits and see these different health benefits. And there's many major health organizations that have made statements about the healthfulness of a plant-based diet. You see here from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, well-planned vegetarian diets are completely healthful and nutritionally adequate for people throughout all different stages of life and have a number of different health benefits. You saw a lot of those on the last slide, but anywhere from the American Heart Association to cancer or leading cancer organizations, they tout more plant-based diets and incorporating more plants into your diet for benefits as far as chronic conditions, for overall health and longevity within our lives. So the research shows that people who follow more vegetarian, vegan, and diets, they have longer lifespans, a reduced risk of disease that you saw on one of those last slides. You can see some of those studies here. So as far as longer lifespan, in 2007, there was an EPIC study of about 520,000 people, so quite a large sample size there. That shows a much more longer lifespan amongst those who had a more plant-based diet. This study also showed that vegans, vegetarians, and pescatarians overall had a lower BMI. And though BMI is not a marker that works for all of us, and a lot of the health markers can be independent of the body size or composition, BMI within this study was one that just overall was correlated to those other positive health markers and longer lifespan. You can see some of those other studies listed here. So eating a more plant-based diet, one that is more rich in those whole foods and all those different things, it really does require a little bit more planning and preparation to ensure that you're having a nutritionally sound diet. And some of those challenges that often people experience are listed here on this slide. So first and foremost, planning and preparation for all of us, especially when we have such busy lives. Planning and preparing meals in general, plant-based or not, can be really overwhelming. But it can be when you're trying to go add in the layer of going more plant-based.
Yeah, I restarted my computer.
It can be a challenge for those who are wanting to make this their goal. And we can talk about some of those things and how planning and preparation, what that could look like for you, can make you successful and not be such a big challenge. Also, one of the barriers, one of the challenges that people note when going more plant-based is their lack of cooking skills. How do I cook this? Well, I got this new vegetable and I don't know what it is, and I don't really know how to prepare it, but this recipe that I found online sounds great, but I don't know how to break down an eggplant. And that's okay. You learn, you find new different ways, you find new different cooking skills, and we can talk about some of those things and what that looks like to help it be less of a challenge for you. Another challenge is looking at when you are dining out, are there plant-based options at the restaurant that you are choosing? The kind of great thing about where we are today is that it's a lot easier to choose more plant-based options when dining out, because like I said in the beginning, even some of our fast food restaurants are incorporating more plant-based items into their menus. So not necessarily more healthful as far as their ingredients and what they do for your body, but Starbucks, they have an Impossible breakfast sandwich on their menu. Burger King, their famous Whopper, you can get us an Impossible burger now. So though those two options, they might not be the most helpful and give you the most health benefits, they are still plant-based and not an animal-based protein. And a lot of really, more popular culinarians are going more plant forward. They're challenging themselves to add more plants into their dishes and bring that same level of intrigue and enticement into their dishes that they would give to animal proteins previously. They're bringing those into their menus and using them on plants, which is really great to see. And then one of the last challenges, this is definitely not on all of the list, and I'm sure for all of you, you have maybe something in the back of your head of that, but what about this type of challenge? And that's okay. This is not a complete list. Hopefully we can talk through some of those things today to help you feel more confident in the challenges that you feel like you're facing and going more plant-based. But one of the other challenges that I often hear, and even myself as Someone who really strives to eat more plant-based is the overall enjoyment of it. When I first went into this, I remember having BLTs with my family, and we enjoy, on a summer day having a BLT. And I really wanted to try tempeh bacon. It wasn't something that I had really had, at least just like on a BLT. And so I tried that, and for me, just wasn't the same. Like, I really personally would rather have a BLT with real bacon. And so for me, the enjoyment there, and, at the beginning, I was a little, frustrated and overcome, and, feeling like this was just going to be a huge challenge. I'm like, gosh, can I never have bacon ever again? Am I going to be amiss if I don't have a BLT in my life? But, I, sat back and I thought, like, oh, okay, how can I enjoy a BLT? How can I enjoy bacon? And have it on this sandwich, enjoy the meal with my family. And so for me, I just don't have as much bacon on my BLT, and I add some additional veggies to it. So I'll add something like eggplant to my BLT, or I'll put mushrooms with it, or another slice of tomato on there, to give me kind of like that big, bulky, delicious sandwich. Still that delicious flavor of bacon that I really like and don't feel like I personally can get from substitutes. But then still incorporating a lot more plants, but just having a little bit less of the animal protein. For me, it really works really well. So when we were talking about kind of the planning of it and how to really reap the benefits, and looking at the nutritional quality of the diets that we have when going more plant-based, there are some things that we need to take into consideration. So just in general, a well-planned plant-based diet, really any diet, even if you're including animal proteins, is rich in fruits and vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, and oils. All of these different things, and having these different components within your diet will give you those different nutrients that your body needs in order to work in the best way. So one of the things that I always hear about when people want to go more plant-based, and in particular working with athletes, whether they're at the collegiate level or more recreational athletes, is protein. So how do I make sure that I'm getting enough protein if I am eating more plant-based in general? And there are several different plant-based sources of protein, and layering these all in together can get you to your individual protein goals, even if you are an athlete and have maybe more increased protein needs. So you can get those from legumes like beans, lentils, peas. You can incorporate different soy foods and have different ways of preparing them. So for instance, tofu, tempeh, like you heard me talk about tempeh bacon. Maybe you're incorporating different types of milk alternatives that have some added protein in them as well. Different nuts and nut butters, seeds and seed butters. Our whole grains are awesome because they are such like double whammy powerhouses that are giving us lots of vitamins and minerals. They're giving us lots of fiber, but they're also giving us protein. So whole grains are great to incorporate into your diet because you're getting all of these different benefits plus additional protein in a great carbohydrate source, all in one, that wouldn't be found in a more refined grain. And even some of our vegetables, peas, spinach, broccoli, all of those per cup have 6 grams of protein. So if you think about a meal that you're putting together, combine all of these different things, even in the smallest amounts that make sense for one dish, you're getting enough protein in that one dish. Add in snacks and everything like that, and you are more than well covered. And from, you can see here about like kind of where those protein needs lies for kind of like our general population, and about how we kind of sometimes incorporate a little bit too much protein for what our bodies need. And there is kind of that cutoff, that like plateau mark where our body doesn't need any more protein and uses it in a different way. And even for athletes, some of our most famous athletes at the professional level or at the Olympic level eat a vegan or vegetarian diet and are extremely successful. I'm in Kansas City, and I was a huge fan since I was growing up of Tony Gonzalez. Tony Gonzalez obviously is no longer playing, but he's vegan and arguably one of the tight ends, or the best tight ends to ever play in the NFL. Maybe I'm a little biased because I am in Kansas City, but lots of other really well-known here, athletes within the states as well as international athletes have a plant-based diet and are extremely successful. So some other nutrients that we want to touch on to make sure that we are incorporating into a plant-based diet, and one that sometimes is of concern for someone who is going more vegan or vegetarian, is calcium. And that's because for the most part, our calcium is coming from dairy, or that's how we've kind of traditionally thought about our main source of calcium. However, there are lots of different products out there that are fortified with calcium. So, finding an orange juice, for example, that's fortified with calcium and vitamin D. Those two vitamins like to work together to make sure that they are best absorbed. There are different cereals out there that are fortified as well. You can also find this mineral in leafy greens. So having some of those more dark leafy greens in your dishes can add calcium as well. And as we talk about, we're going to talk about a few more nutrients, but one thing I want to say here before we keep on going into them is if you feel as though any of these are more lacking in your diet, you can speak to your doctor about getting blood work and finding out what your body is in need of. And if there's ever something that you feel as though is not practical for you to incorporate into your diet for whatever reason, there are different ways that you can supplement them, but always talk to your to your doctor before incorporating any type of supplements. Some supplements can interfere with certain medications that you may be taking. They may not be necessary for you specifically, and sometimes can be not necessarily needed in a healthful diet. So that's often a question that I get asked as well. So I wanted to talk about that before we moved into the next one. So another vitamin that is often of concern is vitamin D. So for people who eat meat or other animal products, they are looking at vitamin D and incorporating those pretty easily within their diet. There are different ways that you can incorporate vitamin D into your diet. So like I said, there are fortified items that have vitamin D in them. Any of the plant-based milks, sometimes those are fortified. Juices, there are also mushrooms, and you can see like on the label that they are more enhanced with vitamin D. And then just getting outside, your body can metabolize. There's different types of vitamin D, one that your body metabolizes from the foods that you eat, and then also from sunlight. It's hard for me to say that when I'm looking outside and it's a gloomy day here in Kansas City. But on those days, that you can get outside, even just 10 minutes a day can help you get more vitamin D. And then vitamin B12 for vegans and vegetarians is also one that is often of concern. And that is because some of the richest sources of B12 are animal products. But just as we talked about those last minerals, you can find this fortified in a lot of different products, and you can incorporate them into your diet. One in particular that I incorporate into a lot of different dishes, or even sometimes sprinkle on popcorn for a snack is nutritional yeast. It does take a lot of nutritional yeast to get kind of like the full serving and how much we need of vitamin B12, but it is one little way that you can incorporate that into your diet. If you are choosing to be vegan, it may be something that you should more strongly consider supplementing in your diet. So you heard back when I was talking about the different challenges to going more plant-based. Well, how do you just incorporate more plants into your diet? What does that look like? And it really can be pretty easy to do. So if you're familiar with the dietary guidelines for Americans, those the most recent ones that came out really were pushing much more plants into our plates. The Harvard Healthy Eating Plate as well. Those are two great examples, two great resources to look at in order to figure out, well, what does like just a healthy plate in general, plant-based or not, how does that look? And so some of the ways that you can incorporate more plants is just by first just building your plate in that way. You can see here what it may look like. So half of your plate is more fruits and vegetables, a quarter of it is more whole grains, and then a quarter of it is protein. If your plate right now maybe is a little bit higher on the animal protein level and you're getting more into maybe a half and half type of situation, how can you work to maybe take the slice of the pie and make it a little bit smaller and decrease how much animal protein you have on your plate? Just that in of itself, that small little move, can make you have more of a plant-based diet. One of the things that I like to do is I like to do mixed dishes where I incorporate more plants into certain dishes along with animal protein as well. So one of the things that I have sitting here, these are green lentils. We buy them in like a bag, and so like I have these little things in my pantry that I put them in. But green lentils in particular, I will cook these and then I will add them into ground meat dishes. So like when I make tacos, we do sometimes ground turkey, sometimes ground beef if it's on sale. Season it with taco seasoning, and then I add in lentils, and yes, even my kids eat it. And I have one kiddo that is, kind of particular in the foods that he eats. Some other things that I do to go kind of like a little bit more mixed in my dishes is, pardon this can because it arrived to my door a little bit dented, but is jackfruit. So some things that I'll do is like if I do a pulled pork sandwich where I put a pork butt into the crock pot and we're gonna have pulled pork sandwiches, I will make sandwiches with the barbecue and then shred up some of the jackfruit and do a little bit of half and half. That's a way for us and our family to be a little bit more plant-based, which helps us obviously reap some of the benefits of these different plant items. It also, just from a budget perspective, allows us to have buy lentils, which are far more cheap, more inexpensive than a like ground meat, ground beef, ground turkey even. So it helps us from a health perspective and from a budget perspective. So a few more tips on how to eat more plant-based. If you are in the Minneapolis region and you're part of one of our Bon Appetit accounts, you can look for these different icons on the menu for any of our vegan and vegetarian options. Vegan, it will not have any animal items in it, including honey, and we follow the lacto-ovo definition of vegetarian, which means that our vegetarian items could include eggs or dairy in them. So working through our different menus, how can you have a more plant-forward breakfast? Oats, both sweet and savory. I think sometimes people forget that oats can be savory and they're super delicious. It can be a great way to be more plant-based in the morning. Trying out a more plant-based yogurt. There's different like soy yogurts, coconut yogurts out there, and loading them up with a nice granola and some fruit in there. Tofu scramble is actually one that is super easy. It was one that I was talking to my friends a lot when eggs were so expensive. I was like, try a tofu scramble. So good, so easy. A block of tofu costs like $1.50 or $1.75 for one, and you can zhuzh it up and do whatever you want and add different vegetables to make a similar type of scramble. Really, really good. For lunch, you could have something like a grain bowl, tofu, edamame, pickled vegetables, something like that. Even if you had a little bit of animal protein in there just to give it a little bit of flavor that you like, totally okay. Using kind of like my BLT as an example here. If you have a wrap where maybe you typically go a little bit heavier on the different like lunch meats or things that you put into a wrap, adding some more veggies in there to give you some that still like kind of like substantialness to a lunch wrap, by having more veggies packed in there versus animal proteins. Different salads, having a little bit of cheese on there, just enough to give flavor. Great lunch option. And then in dinner, look at those classic comfort foods, or some of your favorites from, kind of a more global cuisine, and look at how maybe you can make them a little bit more plant forward and not use meat as much. I talked about the lentils within ground meats. But something that I will often do to not use as much dairy is that I will go for coconut milk and have this in my pantry really often. And I'll use this to make kind of more of a creamy sauce. So say I am making like a chili mac or something like that, like where I made, chili and you maybe just use lentils in it, or, just do like a bean chili, but I still have some mac and cheese in there. I do a little bit of coconut milk and then, sprinkle it with cheese. So still using some things that come from an animal, like using cheese, but I'm going more plant-based by using coconut milk. And with those other strong flavors in there, you really don't, taste the coconut. You can also do something like eggplant parmesan. For me, my air fryer is my best friend. It's the best way for me to get kind of that like crispiness that I want from some more kind of like animal-based products that I like, but in an easy way in my kitchen. So for example, like if I want like a really crispy cauliflower, like kind of nugget, or like buffalo, we do like buffalo wings, type of like chicken wing type of things, like boneless wings, and I'll do cauliflower and I'll do it in the air fryer and get it nice and crispy, because flavor for food is important. What food it is and what the ingredients are important, but like that texture is really something that for me in eating more plant-based is something that's really important in making sure that I want those dishes and I crave those dishes. Snacks, incorporating those different plant-based snacks throughout the day really can, help make sure that you're meeting all of those nutritional needs that we talked about earlier. So whether it's just an apple and peanut butter, or maybe you're making more kind of like an energy bite type of thing and rolling it together with some nut butter, and then adding in. So one thing that I really like to add into those different things is these are like, you can get a really big bag of flax seeds. I choose the whole flax seeds and then choose to like just grind them up in my little like these little like push down blender things. You can use like an old coffee grinder even, to add them into granolas, or even if I have like Cheerios in the morning, I'll sprinkle this on there. It's a great source of omega-3 fatty acids. They're really inexpensive. So I choose to go the whole route because I can get this for a lot less money, and they won't go bad. And I choose to just grind them up as I need it. But if you're looking for something to add into your pantry that's easy to add into a lot of different snacks, great item to have. And as we're talking through, as you maybe are just a little curious about eating more plant-based, snacks are a great place to start, incorporating. Like maybe you're used to having more cheese as a snack, or you have something like a jerky or something like that, or in your snacks, how can you have your snacks be a little bit more plant-based before jumping into a big meal like lunch or dinner? So I wanted to have a little bit of discussion around some of my most favorite plant-forward meals, and then I do see like the chats going, and so I wanted to kind of like put this into the chat, and then my next slides will have a little bit of questions and discussions. But for me, honestly, like my favorite plant-forward meals are ones that remind me of other dishes. So I talked about like going like a buffalo cauliflower type of thing. I love that. I love incorporating a buffalo flavor into cauliflower, or doing like a buffalo chickpea salad type of thing. I want it to remind me of these other dishes. I like those flavors in other dishes, and so that's what I really like. I like to go a little bit more innovative. Just recently, I've started experimenting with shredding tofu to kind of get like that different texture. And I incorporated it into with some barbecue sauce, and did it like a nice little like quesadilla. And so just looking at how I can use tofu in a different way instead of just like cubing it up and throwing it in the air fryer or whatever. Those are some of my most favorite plant forward meals. But I'd love to hear yours, and then jump into any of the questions.
Yeah, so I'll start. We're up on time, so if you do have to leave, that's totally fine. We'll make sure we get your question answered, and you'll be able to hear the question in the recording. And we'll be sure to send out the slide deck and any necessary recap. We'll make sure we get your questions to Leslie if we can't answer them. So one of the main first questions is imitation meat healthy as a replacement for animal meat?
So as we're talking about kind of like overall healthfulness of any food, choosing the whole version of an item is always going to be more healthful. So beans, lentils, legumes, and getting like those and having those in your diet are going to be just innately more healthful than an imitation. Something like, a Beyond Burger, Impossible Meat, or any of those different things. But just like any other convenience food, they could have a place in your diet. So, for example, if having a bowl with ground Beyond crumbles in it, it gives you that texture and that flavor of meat that you're really wanting. And allows you to have more vegetables in that meal. Totally a great place in your diet because it's helping you incorporate plants in other ways. But in general, trying to go more whole, even with our plant-based choices, is going to be more helpful for you.
Great, thank you. We have two questions about looks like kind of getting their kindergartner or 5-year-olds to adopt a plant-forward diet, or any special consideration. So what top 2 tips would you give to these attendees?
Sure. I mean, I think having that familiarity is something that they really enjoy. I know for my kids, like that's what they want. Like they want to have mac and cheese. And I let them know that like I do butternut squash mac and cheese and puree that in there. So I think that familiarity is something that's really important, especially if you're just starting out and trying to incorporate more plants. I mean, younger than that, starting them younger and just having it being a part of your lifestyle is something that can benefit them because they don't know, really any different. But I mean, just experiment when they're that young. They're just trying to understand what foods they do and they do not like. And it's okay. If you try something and they don't like it, try it again. They might like it later. Sometimes the reason they don't like it the first time is just because it's new and different.
Great. And what would be your recommendation for people if they are maybe adopting a plant-forward diet, but they think they might be lacking in a particular nutrient deficiency? So what would be your recommendation for people to get checked?
Mhm.
even if they're not adopting plant forward as well.
Sure. I mean, that's a great discussion to have with your doctor and see, kind of starting maybe with like your general, if you do an annual checkup, what your blood work looks like. You can get additional panels to find out like maybe like what your vitamin D level is, for example. It's a great place to start. Talk to your doctor about going more plant-based and what that means for you. So that's the best place to start. And then if you need kind of more direction, you can always work with a dietitian. Often your doctor may have someone within their practice they can refer you to.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So let's do 2 more, and then I'll kind of follow up with Leslie afterwards for any other ones.
Mhm.
A few main questions were about any suggestions for recipes. So we'll be sure to share the Bon Appetit website with all the
Mhm.
recipes. And then maybe you can compile like your favorite podcast, book recommendations. We had a few questions around that.
Sure.
And then a few questions about soy.
Mhm.
Someone says, is soy good? How often? And then someone else said, can you explain how soy or other plant-based items high in natural estrogen can affect those with estrogen positive breast cancer? So that's really specific. So maybe,
Yeah. I mean, it
so
is.
maybe soy in general.
Sure. I mean, it's a question that, I often get a lot when we're talking about more soy products. I mean, sometimes it can be your personal preference. So if you want to not incorporate soy into your diet, it totally can be done. You can still get, protein from other things. You saw that in the presentation. So if that's something that you're not wanting to incorporate in your diet, it's not necessary. We can kind of start there. I think, without kind of like getting in the weeds of it too much, that area of research has really progressed around how your body identifies those hormone receptors within soy, to where that's not as impactful, even within those with breast cancer or those different levels. So I mean, work with your doctor. I always want you to get kind of that one-on-one help, because you all are very much individuals and have different body chemistries and different things going on. So work with your doctor if you need to, work more one-on-one with a dietitian that can really help you. But long and short, you don't, if your personal preference is something that you are worried about, you do not have to include soy in your diet and be successful in being more plant-based.
Great. So as a follow-up, we'll make sure we get Leslie's favorite podcast, book recommendations. We'll be sure to share some links for good vegetarian vegan recipes and maybe some herbs and spices good for vegetarian diet. We'll be sure to follow up with all of those. Thank you, Leslie, for joining us today, and thank you all for attending. Once again, if you have any questions, comments, feedback, please let us know. And we hope you have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. Thank you so much.